Well, my name's Daniel Moylan. I'm a member of the House of Lords. I take the Conservative whip. I've been a member of the House of Lords for very nearly 6 years. I was made to peer on the nomination of Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Currently, I'm the shadow transport spokesman in the Lords because I have a bit of experience of transport from a political angle. No, I've never done the job professionally, but as a politician, I've been involved in transport for very much of my life over the last 20 years or so. And so going back before I entered the House of Lords, I was a councillor in London for nearly 30 years. Harry, it's terrifying. Nearly 30 years in Kensington and Chelsea. I was under Boris, I was Deputy Chairman of Transport for London and on the board of Transport for London. I was on the board of Crossrail when it was being built and so on. So I've got quite a lot of experience of that sort of thing. I've always been a Conservative. I was a Conservative since around the time I was leaving school and going to university, sort of, you know, I can't remember exactly when I joined the party, but it was around that sort of time. And when I was at university, I was a member of the Conservative Party. And I've never wavered in that. I mean, of course, I've wavered. I've been insulted. I've been treated with contempt. I've been served up with socialism dressed up as conservatism. The Conservative Party does all these things to its members, but I have stayed a member, despite occasionally thinking that it was a bit of a dog's life being a conservative. But if we take control, Harry, if young people like you with conservative ideas get control of the party, then for the next generation it will be properly conservative, I hope. Well, it was rather fun. I mean, Boris, there's no doubt Boris is a conservative, but the truth is that he was elected. What gave him the margin and the edge to win election was his open and engaging personality and the fact that people liked Boris, and they so I think a lot of people turned out to vote for him who weren't conservative, um, or who never would normally vote. At least enough of them did so to carry him over the bar on two occasions, not by huge majorities, but then you don't need huge majorities to win elections. And I felt when he was running London, he gave it a sort of sense of purpose. There was a sense of things getting better. And there was a sense of somebody who represented the city. Not in, people complained about, he looked as though he wasn't properly dressed and things like that. So, and it's true, he didn't look like a stuffed shirt in a formal and official way. If that's what you want, you should have voted for somebody else. But he did represent, if you like, the fun and vibrant side of the city, and people saw him, and he was a world-renowned figure. Everyone around the world knew who Boris was, because the crazy hair, and the sort of the odd manner and so on, and they liked him. It was a sort of he generated a sort of affection. It's a very, very interesting phenomenon politically. Um, I think you'd have liked Boris. I think you still would, but it's not the same now, of course. I'm
Hmm.
afraid his successor, I'm going to say something a bit sort of disobliging now, but I'm going to start by saying that his predecessor, Ken Livingstone, although we demonized him as a great figure of the left, and he was a great figure of the left, he was an extreme leftist. Nonetheless, he was one of the most interesting and intelligent people I'd come across in politics. And he had really interesting ways of thinking about political life. And he was a very successful politician too. Sadly, now I understand he's in a home and suffering from various forms of dementia. I don't know exactly what, which is a great pity. But he was a very interesting man. Unfortunately, his we've now got a mayor for the last, how long, since 2016. How, God, it's nearly 10 years. We've now got a mayor for 10 years who's neither interesting in the way that Livingstone was, nor and imaginative in the way Livingstone was, nor interesting and engaging in the way that Boris was. It's just terribly sad to see the mayoralty decline in the way it has. Thought when Burnham went to Manchester, which was about
Mhm.
the same time, that we'd got the short straw in London.
Would you have preferred Burnham in London?
Oh, yes, I think so. I mean, he's sort of human. He's sort of human. I think as Prime Minister, he's going to be a complete disaster, partly because all factions of the Labour Party have invested their hopes in him. Nobody dares ask him a question. They haven't got a clue what he's going to do as Prime Minister. He hasn't given a single interview this week. The truth is, I don't think he's got a clue either what he's going to do as Prime Minister, but they all think he's going to give them the policies they want. And he won't be able to do that. And the country will be bankrupted by it. So I give it sort of 6 months before it collapses in complete chaos. And then we'll discover that being a nice man, as I think he is, I think he probably is a nice man, being a nice man with a sort of smile and a cheeky, chappy attitude is maybe okay for being mayor, but not enough for running the country. Well, I was the deputy chairman for 8 years, and Boris was the chairman of the board, so I was his deputy. Boris, of course, had many responsibilities, not just transport, um, and he always chaired the board in person himself. But the day-to-day business of, looking after board committees and things like that, chairing those things, was something he didn't really have time for given his other responsibilities. So I took on a lot of that for him and a lot of the detailed stuff about the implementation of his policies.
Do you think TfL has been well looked after your departure?
I think no, I think the current mayor has a sort of contempt for it, and treats it, I mean, very badly. But what's really damaged TfL, and this would have happened in any way, in any case, is COVID. So, if you like, when Boris was mayor, TfL reached the peak of its effectiveness and its reputational popularity. And that was the games, the Olympic Games, which you may be old enough to remember, and the Paralympic Games. And TfL did so well during the games and became just people had a very positive attitude towards it as a result of the games. Um, COVID, of course, killed the material base of the TfL operation because it's fundamentally a passenger transport service, and there were no passengers, practically no passengers on the network, on the tube certainly, and not that many on the buses during that period. And numbers have not fully recovered ever since then, which has a direct impact on fares. And without money, TfL can't run. So you might think, oh, it needs lots of subsidies. Well, it does sometimes need subsidies. What it really needs is lots of people paying fares. And if it's got people paying fares, then it can run and grow and develop better services and maintain things properly and improve.
What was the advertising revenue like? Was that quite strong?
Yeah, well, yes. During my time, or under Ken, the predecessor, I think, the advertising on the stations had been let out on a contract for a fixed amount of money to an American company. So, and it was an astonishingly good deal for London Underground and turned out to be lose the American company quite a lot of money, until eventually we had to let them off a bit, or they'd have gone completely under as a result. So, from that point of view, it was a fantastic contract for TfL because they had offered to pay us more than it was worth. and probably more than we knew it was worth at the time.
Has it changed
Part of it
recently?
was that part of it was I don't know what the current arrangements are. Those contracts don't last forever; they get renewed, and I wouldn't know what the current contract was. As 10 years since I was involved, the part of the contract in my day was the digitization of the adverts, which at the start of the period they were all paper adverts, paper posters, and then they were to move up to being digital. They could all. The great thing then is you can change the advert but just at the press of a button. You don't have to send someone down to scrape off the old poster and put up a new one, as in the old days.
You're obviously on the shadow transport. How have you how are you looking at things nationally?
Well, this government has a plan for transport, as far as I can make out. The plan is that everything's going to be nationalised. So there isn't going to be a private sector involvement in transport at all. The rail companies are being squeezed out, and the train operating companies are being taken back slowly into government control. Even the buses locally have now, local authorities have now been given the power to what you might call municipalize the buses on the base in the same way that Andy Burnham did, and that was under legislation for Manchester that in fact the Conservatives passed. Any claim that Andy Burnham makes about, I ran the B, I set up the B buses, that was all under legislation that the powers the Conservative government gave him by agreement. Um, so it's very much the idea that the private sector is going to be out of it altogether. Now, this is the union agenda. And if I look at what the government has done in practice about transport since they came in 2 years ago, I can see the hands of the transport unions behind the government at every turn. This is payback time for the money they received when they were in opposition and leading up to the general election. It is to give the trades unions what they want: nationalisation, municipal bus services, and of course, huge power, because when you have a single employer on the railways, for example, then you can have a strike that involves all of the railways. When you don't, when you have employment spread amongst different train operating companies, then by law you have to each company and each workforce has its own industrial dispute, and therefore you might have a strike on one line, part of the railways, but not on the other. So it's all giving the unions exactly what they want. It's terrifying to see matters rolled back to the 1970s in this way. We've yet to see what the unions will make of their power, and in particular against a Conservative government when we come back to power. Um, but they will have been given huge powers that that people aren't monitoring.
You were involved with Crossrail. Was that successful?
I think everyone thinks Crossrail is very successful. It was a bit late, a couple of years late. It was a bit over budget, not hugely.
Where
Uh,
exactly is it?
Crossrail. Oh,
Hmm.
Crossrail is the railway. Well, you need to think about it in two different ways. So, in infrastructure terms, Crossrail was a new tunnel running under London from roughly Westbourne Grove, which is the other side of Paddington, to the west of Paddington, under Paddington, Bond Street, Tottenham Court Road, Farringdon, out to Whitechapel, and then it starts to come out of tunnel. That's the infrastructure project. And inside that tunnel, there is a railway. And then you ask yourself, well, what is the service we're running in that tunnel? And the answer is we run, or they run, a train service from Reading through Maidenhead, Slough, into Paddington, where it goes into tunnel, and out to a place called Shenfield in Essex. And it has a branch in the east which goes down to Canary Wharf and a place called Abbey Wood, and a branch in the west which goes down to Heathrow. Nice new trains. As a way of crossing London from east to west, it's very fast. It's hugely popular amongst users. I've never heard a rude word said about Crossrail. Anyone who uses it sort of loves it. And it's been a great success. As I say, a bit late, a bit over budget, but I know people get very agitated about things like that. But I think when you're building a piece of infrastructure which is going to last at least 200 years, because it'll be there at least that long, probably longer, um, then being a couple of years late at the beginning, people forget about it. And they have forgotten about it. They just love using it.
Could these
It's
same,
called the Elizabeth line. The
yes,
service is called the Elizabeth line. The tunnel itself was the Crossrail project. That was the hard part, was building the tunnel with the railway in it.
could the same plan not have been applied to HS2? And would that mean HS2 would have been built quicker?
Well, HS2, I mean, so many things went wrong in the planning of HS2 and in the construction of HS2. There's no real comparison. Uh, Funnily enough, the man who was last chief executive of Crossrail is now the chief executive of HS2 trying to sort it out. So some of those skills, I think, are being carried over. Um, Crossrail, people complain about this. They say Crossrail was being discussed for 20 years before you started building it. And that's a bad thing. But it has a good side to it. The good side to it is that when you start building it, at least you know what you're building. HS2 was just rushed through an idea invented by politicians, in fact, by the Labour Transport Secretary in 2008. He started it, but other politicians, including Conservatives, bought into it. And it was, we want this railway, how are you going to build it? Nobody said, what's the railway for? Oh, it's going to get you there faster. Well, do you need to get there faster? No, but you do need more capacity on the line. It's not speed you should be, but you call it high speed too when you give everyone the wrong impression. And then you set off building it, and then people have to be bought off. So more and more of it is put into tunnel, which is ridiculous. Why do you want to spend a railway be in tunnel going through the countryside? It's ridiculous. Very expensive, adding costs the whole time. And then you let the environmentalists and the nature nutters have a go at it as well. So you end up with £100 million tunnel for bats to avoid, I mean, it's just sort of complete joke catastrophe.
I mean, you're obviously in the House of Lords. How does the Conservative Party work in the House of Lords?
Very well. It's almost as if the 2024 general election hadn't happened. We're not the government anymore. We don't sit on the government benches. We sit on the opposition benches. But if you remember, we were the largest group before. We didn't have a majority, but we were the largest group. But we're still a very large group, even though the government has wickedly thrown out the hereditary peers, which affected us to some extent, and of course has, and this is not particularly wicked, has nominated more Labour peers, which is something in my view, they are entitled to do after a long period in opposition, and they're in government now, and they're entitled to nominate new peers. That's fine. What I think was wicked was kicking out the hereditaries who brought such lustre to the Lords. So we're run by, our leader is Lord True, who was the leader when we were in government, and he was Lord Privy Seal. He's no longer Lord Privy Seal. He's now the leader of the opposition. We have our own whips, who organisers and managers. We have lost the support of the civil service, of course, but we have a little team of half a dozen brilliant young conservative researchers who help us in those of us who are on the front bench in preparing for battle with the government. The House of Lords is a surprisingly cross-party place. So we do quite often win votes against the government when we are able to agree with the Liberal Democrats or with there's a large number of peers who are crossbenchers or unaffiliated. And so it's not it's not like the Commons, where one party has a huge majority and gets whatever it wants. The government doesn't have a majority. We didn't when we were in power. They don't. They can be defeated, and they are defeated quite frequently. Those changes to legislation do, however, have to be agreed by the Commons. And if the Commons insists on changing what we've done, then after a little bit of to and fro, we call it ping pong, which I think is a bit demeaning, but that's the expression that's used. After ping pong, we normally give way on an issue because the elected House does have a primacy by virtue of its democratic constitution that we don't have.
This video is sponsored by Proton VPN. Every day, large companies collect huge amounts of personal data, browsing habits, locations, searches, and online activity. Proton VPN puts control back into the hands of users like yourself. With encrypted connections and a strong focus on privacy, Proton VPN allows people to browse securely, whether at home, at work, or on a public Wi-Fi. In an age of growing surveillance, data protection, and cyber threats, online privacy is becoming increasingly important. Proton VPN offers a straightforward way to browse the internet more securely and with greater independence. If you are interested in joining Proton VPN, click the link in the description and you can get up to 70% off. Are you happy with the direction of the party with Kemi Badenoch?
Yes, generally, yes. I mean, obviously, everyone is going to say, I think Kemi is going in the right direction, and I'd like her to go a bit more in the direction that I favour. And for me, that would be a bit more anti-Europe, a bit more right-wing, a bit firmer on immigration and things of that sort. But there'll be other people in the party who will say Kemi is doing a very good job. I agree with Daniel, and I'd like her to go a bit more in my direction. So there's a bit sort of, and the party is still a coalition of people who don't agree about everything, even though we might agree about a lot. I think she's doing well both in managing that coalition and in regaining an audience for the Conservative Party, which we'd completely lost. I mean, 2024 was a disaster, but it was a predictable disaster and a deserved disaster. In my view, Rishi Sunak was a predictable and predictably disastrous prime minister. And where we ended up was not a surprise to me, but it will take a long time to rebuild. And Kemi is at least getting an audience. People listen to her and they're developing respect for her. And I think in that sense, and I think she is developing properly conservative policies to get away from some of the sheer idiocy that we had in that last year under Sunak. You know, football governance bills and smoking bans and all sorts of complete rubbish like that, and back onto a more conservative footing.
I agree with what direction the party should go in with you, but I spoke to Lord Heseltine this morning, who, of course, is very against Europe, pro-Europe and against Brexit. What is your analysis of Brexit?
I think Brexit was the most marvellous thing that happened to this country in my political life, and it's for your generation to build on it and take advantage of the opportunities it gives. And this perpetual crawling back on your knees to Brussels, only to be kicked in the teeth and be grateful for it, is a sign of a deep pathology, in my view, in a part of the political establishment in the United Kingdom. I mean, a real mental illness on their part. And they've simply got to be overcome. At the moment, they seem dominant in the Labour Party. I mean, we don't know in a way, because one of the astonishing things about Andy Burnham is that he's about to become Prime Minister and he hasn't spoken to the press all week. We actually have no idea at all what his policies are, what he's going to do. And as I think I said earlier, I suspect he has no idea either. Is he going to go back on this crawling back to Europe thing, only to be kicked in the teeth? It never works. You never get anything out of Europe. Look at Starmer. He's been crawling back to Europe for 2 years, and they keep having to postpone the summits at which they're going to agree something because the European demands are too strong for him, even for him. Which must give you an idea. He's the man who wanted the second referendum. He's the man who led the campaign to betray the British people's vote. How did we ever allow him to become Prime Minister?
Would it even be possible to return without a referendum?
Well, everything's possible, but I don't think in practice it would be politically possible to do that. But I think the great thing, Harry, is that all these people are suffering under a delusion. And the delusion is that it's our choice whether we go back into the European Union. But we have no decision-making say about it. All we can do is decide to apply. The decision whether we rejoin the European Union is one for the member states, and any member state can veto it. And they'll just look at our politics and they'll say, Christ, these people are going to be out again in 10 years. Why do we want to put up with that disruption and that melodrama? No, they're going to say, we're going to veto it. We'll veto it. It'll probably be the French. Remember, it will be our fourth application to join the European Union. And two of them, we applied 3 times before we joined. You may not know that. We applied twice in the 1960s, and we were vetoed by the French.
Was this when it's the European Community? Or
yes. Mm-hmm. We called it the Common Market then. I don't know what its various name changes are. Yes, and we were vetoed, and we'll be vetoed again. But we'll go through several years of negotiations. We'll get a deal with Brussels, and then somebody will veto us. And by then, what will have happened to investment in this country? Nobody will be investing because they won't know whether we're joining the European Union, not joining the European Union. It will be complete paralysis in the business community, and the economy will just stop, complete. I mean, no chance of growth in the economy. No, we should do the things that grow the economy outside the European Union. We know what what the government can do to help that happen. We want a tax system which incentivizes enterprise and hard work. And we want a regulatory system which puts few barriers in the way of new businesses starting up and older, larger businesses growing in interesting and innovative ways. And AI is a good example of that. Even Labour have got quite good regulatory structures in this country for AI, which is very successful. The European Union, of course, has clamped down on AI. If we rejoin, that would be goodbye to our AI industry, such as it is. A great deal of the tech that we do, the fintech, all the other clever things that we're good at, all of that will be closed down. Just to go back into that sort of directionless lump and lose our democracy, not be able to make our own laws. Why would we want to do this? It's a pathology.
Mm-hmm.
And why does Michael Heseltine want to do it? I have no idea.
I couldn't quite gather this morning.
Did you not explain it to you?
Well, it was... No, he didn't actually. It was my shortest episode so far.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
Well done for saying so, Harry.
If you had to choose one policy that the Conservative Party should focus on, what would it be?
Well, now that's a very difficult question indeed, isn't it? But I think the thing that nobody talks about, but I think does matter, is what does it mean to be a British citizen? If you go to America, it means something to be a citizen. You can do things if you're a citizen that non-citizens can't do. like vote, for example. If you say, to a figure in authority, I'm a citizen, that means something. It may not be very forceful, but it means something. Whereas here in this country, we've so diluted the notion of British citizenship that it's become a sort of library ticket. So you get nothing for being a British citizen. And you can have your citizenship taken away by the Home Secretary more or less at any time, like a library ticket. If you don't return your book, you could have your citizenship taken away from you. And it means nothing. So there are little things you could do, little things. For example, we have free entry to our great museums. Why not have free entry for British passport holders, not for other people? Why shouldn't tourists pay? Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't possibly do that. Yes, you can. You can do that if you want to. That's a small thing. Why should it be so easy for the Home Secretary to remove your citizenship? That's completely an invention of the 20th century. That's not an ancient part of British law. That's all been invented in the 20th century. So does citizenship mean something? And I think I'm not talking at all about ethnicity now. I'm talking about citizenship. And do you feel part of something? Do you get some rewards for being a citizen? When you see people going to citizenship ceremonies and becoming British citizens for the first time, and I have to tell you, when these citizenship ceremonies were introduced by Tony Blair, my reaction was that this was just an immensely tacky, Americanized sort of thing, and it was just dreadful. And I completely disagree with myself now. But when you're at these ceremonies, when you go to these ceremonies, the people who are taking out British citizenship for the first time are so proud and happy. It's like they're like going to a wedding. And they bring all their friends and they dress up and they swear the oath. And it really means something to them. But then it doesn't mean anything to us. We don't realize how much it matters to them and how much it means. So I think we could do work on citizenship and belonging that was not about simply who lives in this country. That's fine. People can live here without being citizens. I'm not saying they, but let's focus on doing something for people who've chosen to be British. That's what I say. I think that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. I listened to you speak about the Online Safety Act. Is that, do you think, one of the regrets of the last government?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I mean, it was another typical. So look, so over 25 years since Blair, there's been a deliberate and conscious program to Europeanize our constitution, to make it more like the European Union's constitution. And part of that is removing powers, removing direct regulatory powers from ministers. Because in their notion, the European notion of the separation of powers, that idea that a minister could have a say in a regulatory matter, in a particular regulatory case, is offensive to their notion of the separation of powers. That's not true in our traditional constitution in Britain, but it is to them. And so they set out, Lord Falconer and Tony Blair, to make our constitution as similar to the European operation as they could. The result was we have this dreadful botch in which we have their constitutional principles bodged together onto ours, and it leads to all sorts of problems. But anyway, to come back to the Online Safety Act, part of that process was to move regulatory decisions away from ministers and to create so-called independent